Today, the plan is to kind of do like a live react to this Lonerbox versus Lauren Southern video. This is not a prepared review. I have not done a line by line of it. That being said, full disclosure, I have not seen it. So, you know, I don't know what happens in it. I don't know how well things are handled. I got a few notes about it on Discord, but that's about it. So not sure exactly what to expect there. And if we miss anything, I'm terribly sorry, but that is the nature of doing this live and not having prepared it in advance.
How's it going? You're live, by the way.
Yeah, I'm very well. Thanks. How are you?
I'm good. I've only watched the first half of your video, by the way. I still have to watch the second half. So if I don't know all the points you've made, that's why. I will get around to it. But
well, my favorite bit comes next, but that's just
no. Oh no, what's that one about?
The 10 tons of HIV.
Oh,
the Booksmarts.
The 10 tons of HIV. Okay, well, I will watch the whole thing. But what did you think about my commentary on the first half? What are your thoughts on that?
I only caught the last few minutes. I was in like another part of the house doing stuff, but
okay, no worries.
I was like, I only asked to call because you skipped over the bit where I said that the lead up to the interview.
Yeah, someone asked me to go back, and I did.
Obviously, I saw that you interviewed. I put that in my video. I show you interviewing panels.
Yeah.
So
like, what did you think went on there? Like, what did you think was happening? Did you think we were like,
I just like
faking it all?
My sister is a journalist. I know that people do film stuff after the fact. I just thought the whole like the evidence board and the like the shipping app stuff. And like the porn acting. I just thought that was kind of funny, you know.
But like you introduced it as Lauren Southern is a lying fuck fake journalist.
Well, what I thought with that
when you just said, you know, your sister does this and people set up shots.
We started out kind of really cordial and fun and back and forth. This is the first bite of the conversation. So Lonerbox said that he has a sister and he understands that journalists will film things after the fact. But she's pointing out, well, if you knew that, then why did you have such a heated take about my journalism and stuff? Now, Lonerbox could respond here by going to one of his critiques on the other things that leads him to believe that. Maybe not just the filming things after the fact. Maybe he has more substantive points that lead to that conclusion, which he should go to. If he gets tricked into defending this point as the one leading him to believe that she's a lying journalist or whatever, that would not be good. I have advice for Lauren. You guys are gonna hate this. If you mean to trap him, so she's walking this tightrope of, I need to make sure that my audience understands the setup for this trap so that when it springs, it has the full impact it's meant to have, while also making sure she hasn't spent enough time on it that Lonerbox can think about the trap and avoid it. So right now she is making this trade-off where she is giving Lonerbox more time to like perceive what's going on and to think about a response, because she's trying to set it up for her audience so that they see the gravity of the point she's trying to make here. I would actually say it would have been better to let him give the off-the-cuff response, like, because he's already starting to talk, than it would be to continue to set this up. I think a viewer like me would probably already understand what's going on here. So that's taking away from what could have been a trap here for Lonerbox, given he was already talking. Wait, aren't you explaining how to become an obstacle to the conversation? So there's a balance here, right? Lauren is, at a lot of points, an obstacle to a conversation, but you need to think from Lauren's perspective, what is she trying to do here? I think that Lonerbox had a lot of very salient criticisms for Lauren. So what is Lauren's goal in this conversation? Lauren's goal is going to be to refute the criticisms that Lonerbox has put forward, and in this specific instance, to kind of throw some questions at the general conclusion of his video, right? So if that's her goal, this is certainly a way to achieve that goal, the same way a trap question would be if you're in a debate, right? So I understand the purpose of what she's setting up here. That's why I'm saying what I'm saying. Now, in terms of like reaching understanding, I don't think that's the purpose of this conversation that they're having with each other. The purpose of this conversation is not to reach the understanding that she had fucked up or whatever. She's actively fighting against what Lonerbox is putting forward in his video based on what he just told her. And Lonerbox is going to have to defend the general critique of his entire video here. So they're at odds here with the things they're trying to accomplish. This isn't like we're discussing a topic, right? And that's going to be the difficult thing here. Now, in an ideal circumstance, Lauren would ask Lonerbox what his critiques were, or would bring up some from the video that she agrees with first, then disagrees with. But I don't think we live in a reality where she's going to talk about critiques that she thought were really good and then go into critiques that she thought was bad. If you are in your real life, which is oftentimes an angle I want to give on these conversations, and you have problems with the criticism that somebody has given you, try to find the ones that you agree with. Give those first. Say, so when you said A, I definitely agree. Sometimes they go way too hard on A. And when you said B, I could totally see that. I didn't see that before, but B is definitely a problem for me. That being said, the one critique that I didn't really understand or agree with was C, because I feel that blah, 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 blah about C. And then the other person is at a place where it's like, oh, they've agreed with 2 of my criticisms. They're not crazy. So if they have problems with this 3rd criticism, they're probably acting in good faith, and then they'll move forward, right? So that's the advice for at home. That's not the way I think that this conversation is going to go, unfortunately.
Well, they don't build fake evidence boards like 3 weeks later. That's something I think that's maybe limited to the alternative media.
Oh no, Lonerbox. I don't think that's your primary criticism.
It wasn't a fake evidence board, though. It was just an evidence board that was on the wall that we actually did end up using. It was a bit of a prop for sure, but it wasn't like fake.
Okay, I'll take your word. So about Panos' lawyer.
I'll take your word for it. Let's fucking drop that, put it aside. That was not a winning engagement, right? And move forward. Okay, so unfortunately, he's going to come out of this optically scathed. So she swung her sword. She gave him a little bit of a cut on the cheek there, maybe a cut across the bridge of his nose, and he's bleeding a little bit. So be careful moving forward. Don't get stuck in these traps, Loner. Very good of you to realize it so quickly and get out of it. You get points for that. Let's see where this goes from here.
Saying the phrase, "we were laundering it."
Yeah.
Do you have the full footage of that, out of interest?
I can get it. Yeah, it's all on hard drives. They would be hard drives in London, not here, since my.
Because I'm just one. I'm just very intrigued about the idea of a lawyer who would like admit that he.
Well, he didn't know it. He had no idea he was being recorded. Obviously.
Yeah, but even just speaking to a total stranger as a lawyer, like, you think you'd know better.
Of course, there was and I won't lie about this, there's obviously with journalism, and this has happened to me the other way around, where I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I thought this person was actually sympathetic to me. There's a degree of, you have to be like, yes, I'm super sympathetic, otherwise people won't be honest. Unfortunately.
She gives several points where she understands that something is funky about this interview that she did with the lawyer, that she used one quote from in her video that Lonerbox was criticizing. So I think that Lonerbox, if I'm remembering correctly, had some criticisms in his video about the use of some footage from a lawyer who made some claims that were like pretty fucking strong, and that maybe a lawyer of sober mind, realizing what the application of this quote would be, would not give it. And she readily admits he didn't know that he was being filmed or recorded. Oftentimes you have to set up situations like this to get people to say things they wouldn't otherwise say. I certainly have been in this situation. She's giving a lot of concessions here that would be towards Lonerbox. So let's see how Lonerbox uses this. She understands that there's something iffy about the way that she did that, though she's couching that in like, this is the way it's done and this is the way other people do it. How does he respond to this?
Yeah, so what I was thinking with, so is there more clarification off that recording? Because the 2 big things I felt that were very missing from that interview with the lawyer was no clarifying question. So him following up saying we were laundering it. We don't know if that's him describing the charges, right? Or actually saying.
You know what? I'm gonna ask I do not have it on my computer here. The hard drives with all of that footage on it. When we were traveling, so we went to Turkey where we had all of our stuff confiscated. That was after our trip to Greece. We were literally mailing hard drives back to London where my editors were throughout our trip. I didn't take any of them home. I was sent edited copies of the film, full transcripts, and usually we would do like, you know how when you open Discord you can do a screen share with editing and watching and cutting, we do that. So I don't own all of the footage on my own hard drive. I have obviously all the final copies, but I can absolutely request and source that if you want.
The conversation is kind of cooled down a little bit. She has this long description about why she doesn't have footage. I want to make a note about the music. So I had several people whine about the music going on and how she probably should have turned off the music. I agree. If you're going to be talking with somebody, you should probably turn off the music. I think Relly knows this for his stream because he's a good streamer. Lauren is less of a good streamer. She's still learning about stuff like this. So maybe a takeaway for Lauren would be to turn off her music. Especially if she's going to have somebody else in the call. When she's talking, probably okay. I think people would be fine with it. But when we have two people talking, the music is an unnecessary third soundtrack to what should otherwise be like a 2-track conversation. She also had the music on when listening to the video. Yikes. Yeah, that's neat good, as the Germans would say. Neat good. During the conversation, it wasn't on. She added it for YouTube. Yikes. Why? If that's true, that's some of the dumbest shit I've ever heard of. Why would she add it for the YouTube video? That's even worse. I was giving her the benefit of the doubt that she's just streaming and she's got a lot going on and she didn't think about like the audio experience.
Did you edit that video?
Yeah, I was part of the editing for sure.
Well,
And it's been like 3 years.
Yeah, I know. I'm not gonna try to put you on the spot or anything.
No. Like, I'm happy to actually.
Good on Loner. Yeah, if it was a long time ago, I totally get that. Not trying to put you on the spot. He did ask a question that almost seemed like it, so he's knowledgeable about how that's being perceived. Good points for Loner here. I appreciate the empathy. He's realizing the position that Lauren is being put into. So good stuff. You may hate Lauren, so you may disagree with me, but I think it's good to have this kind of empathy and understand the position that your words are putting people in. If I were to give a counterexample to this, I would say that like when we look at how sometimes Supreme handles the conversation with people, and I love Supreme, I'm biased, I really like Supreme, he's a personal friend. I think that sometimes when he gets into interrogation mode where he's asking very pointed questions and he follows the scent of like an inconsistency or something like this, people feel the heat of that, especially in how he's asking these questions in his tone. And I think that if he were more accepting of that, more understanding of the position he's putting people into, and he made that clear through the way that he's talking or through his tone of voice, he could get people to unravel even more, which is the purpose of that interrogatory technique, right? And it may be his style to put people on the spot, make them feel hot under the collar, but from my understanding in private conversations, that's not necessarily his intended purpose. So if you want to soften that, doing what Lonerbox just did here is a good example. Just realize the position you're putting people into, and if that's not your intention or that's not going to help what you're going for, then try to diffuse it by saying what he said.
In the video, instead of a clarifying question, because again, that is one thing I know that journalists are supposed to do, I'm sure you'd agree, you're supposed to ask, because he asks Panos the clarifying question. He asks, can I just clarify, you categorically deny the charges? He had to make him say it twice with the question preceding it. Whereas all I hear is, I think it's Kaylin's voice going, what? As in like just making up like almost just a grunt. So that's not, there is no clarifying question, and we don't know the lawyer's name.
Yeah, so okay, George was talking to him off to the side. But yeah, I can go and grab the full footage because I have no doubt in my mind that that is exactly what he said. And you know what? Did you end up going over the Ariel Ricker footage as well in your film?
I don't know if this is intentional, but Lonerbox needs to keep track of when Lauren does this. This is twice in the conversation we've already saw this, where he asks a question, doesn't really get the answer he's looking for to a question, and she's able to give a first part that's going to be like, yeah, so I definitely think that he said that, and I think that's have you seen the full footage about whatever? And now if we talk about have you seen the full footage for whatever, it can either spin into the way that she wants this whole point to end, where she goes, because in that footage we do blah blah blah, and I think blah 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 is the way that it ought to be done, and I think in this other, and then she can go on and on and on. Now we're 20 steps further from what the initial question was. So you have to be careful with that, because Lauren does this in other conversations as well, and if you let her, she'll go off somewhere else. This is something that Destiny was probably afraid of in the BX Bullet conversation, where BX Bullet would start to talk about something else, or would talk about gun safety in general, or would go to larger level points, and he doesn't want her to escape from the specific thing that he's asking. About 3/4 or 4/5 of the way through that conversation, he starts to say that she's psychotic, right? Or he continues to say that she's psychotic, and I need you to answer this one question and blah, blah, blah. It's that fear of going to something else and letting the conversation get away from you that is causing him to react that way. And it's something Destiny's very well aware of, and something that Lonerbox should also be aware of in this kind of conversation. Because if you let it get away from you, then you're losing control over it. And the more often you let that happen, the more often the other person is in control of like the optics of the conversation or where it goes.
No, I think Jose, the YouTuber, had already covered that to kind of an extent, and it kind of was relevant to NGOs, but this was, most of my data was specifically NGOs in the central Mediterranean.
Not, okay, so yeah, because it's no secret.
And there we go. Here is the second point, right? When Lauren goes off onto one of those sorts of other questions that seems tangentially related, she has another point that she wants to make. So anytime you let her or you entertain that without immediately at the end going back to what your central question or point was, you're going to let her get to her second question or her second point. And that's what she's setting up with these. So you have to be aware of that when you're talking to Lauren. This is a really weird framing. Other person is clearly afraid of answering the question. Why are you blaming the person answering the question? I am giving advice, Russell Weebs. So when you say blame, like, you have to realize that is what happened here. He let her get away from the question by using this kind of talkative technique, right? And what I'm saying is to be aware of these things, right? This is advice to Lonerbox. And I don't like, I'm going to set aside this idea of like afraid of answering the question. Is it that she's afraid of answering the question, or is it that she is confident she could redirect this question, right? The one does not necessarily mean the other. So I'm going to set that aside because I don't care to argue that with you. But like, yeah, I'm not blaming Lonerbox for this. I'm pointing out that this is a technique that Lauren will use and has used in the past. And we want to be aware of that when we're having a conversation with her. And if part of your goal is to hold control of the conversation, which is a positive thing for you, then you want to be careful about letting her take that narrative to other places because it might not work out in your favor. Remember what I said at the beginning, that Lauren's purpose here is going to be to refute a lot of the criticisms Loner is making in his videos. So when you let her go off on her own without a leash on that conversation, she's not necessarily going to go in a way that you want her to go. So you want to be careful about how much slack you're leaving on the conversation for her to guide it, right? That's something to keep in mind here. What is the advice for the Lonerbox then? Let her loop around the question? No, like I said before, respond to whatever she said if you really feel the need to, and then at the end of that, tackle on and bring it back to what you originally wanted to say, right? Or dismiss, spend a very little amount of time on what she had just said, repeat what you had said before if need be, and then go back to what you were asking or go back to the purpose of it, or reframe the question in a more specific way that keeps her from going off on a tangent again, right? The whole point is just refocus at the end. If you need to make a statement in response to it, make it. But at the end of that, make sure that we're refocusing, right? Because we don't want to give up in this tug of war game between where the focus of the conversation is.
These NGOs are often partaking in sketchy activities, especially after talking to Ariel Ricker. She was like, yeah, absolutely. We have people that, you know, go and take jet skis across the water. We call them angels, and they grab people and bring them over. We absolutely are training people how to get refugee status, pretending they're Christian and persecuted, because as you know, you even mentioned it in your video, Turkey is a refugee safe country.
Yeah, I'm very curious, what country in particular are Christians getting persecuted in that Muslims aren't?
Well, Turkey is majority Islamic, so that's what the claim would be coming from, because it's really difficult, obviously. When I was in Lesbos...
She answers the question, Turkey. Turkey is the answer to the question. And now she is going to go off in this entire story about her time in these countries and her time in these places because she thinks that that's better for her. So again, this comes back to like, just because she's not giving us these concise answers, or just because she's going off on these story rants, that doesn't mean she's afraid of answering the questions. She has in her mind the way that she wants to talk about all these topics and a script that she has that she wants to get through. And she's going to inject that at every turn that she is able to. This is how she handles conversations with numerous other people. It's how she handled the interview with me. It's how she handles talks with Steven. It's how she's handled other talks that I've seen, other debates of hers. So this is something that she does and you have to be aware of.
There's a place called the Life Jacket Graveyard. And we put footage of it. It's just like hundreds, thousands of life jackets in a pile from people who have just landed on the shore. And in it, you can find people's documents, like partially burned or thrown away. And typically that's because they've been told by traffickers or by NGOs, you can't have your documentation on you because you can be deported if you have your passport and you've come from like a non-refugee country. Or if you've already got refugee status, obviously you're going to be sent back because it's like, no, you can't country shop. You've already been given safe asylum. What I'm saying is...
Oh, good. Finally, a very specific point here from Lauren and a very specific response from Lonerbox. So we had the anecdote Andy on the in-between, but then she makes a point about the advice that NGOs are giving and the circumstances of country shopping. And she's giving specifics now that I think Lonerbox is equipped to combat against. She's not letting him interject here. Let's see where she goes with this interruption, though. Is she going to try to save her skin from the things she previously said? Or why does she not want to let him jump in here?
We found like refugee papers for Turkey in this pile.
Okay, so back to the anecdote Andy thing. I don't think that will save her here, but let's go ahead and see if Loner has the chance to respond.
Yeah, so what I'm asking about is the thing with the Christians thing, because like I know, well, the main refugee countries, I suppose, where there's like Christians being persecuted would be Nigeria, right? Because of Boko Haram. That's like the main country where like a persecuted Christian under a Muslim regime would come from.
Oh, okay. Not responding to any of that. Relief for her, probably. She did not step into a trap by asserting anything that he's giving pushback on. He's going to instead suggest a different country and talk about proving Christianity. Let's see where she goes with that. I wonder if she's relieved. I wonder if she was concerned about that there, as I was for a second. But let's see what answer he gets out of her.
I don't know why you would have to say you're Christian to prove you're persecuted, because Muslims get persecuted by Boko Haram as well.
Well, no, this is in Turkey. They're claiming in Turkey I face persecution for whatever reason. So this is people coming from Turkey. So they're not necessarily saying it's going to stick, but your chances of getting a refugee status after traveling through Turkey.
Well,
the claim could be like, as a persecuted Christian from X country, I don't feel safe in a majority Muslim country again. I need to come to Europe.
You don't actually need to prove that you don't need to stay in the first safe country you arrive in, though. That's not the law.
There we go. Okay, this is what I'm waiting for. I didn't want to say that I knew what the point would be, because I didn't want to word it improperly, but I could swear that was something he talked about in his video. So probably would have been good to respond to that immediately after she said the other thing instead of randomly going to this Nigeria point. But I think this is a central thing here. So let's see where this goes from here. This is a direct challenge to Lauren.
So you can country shop?
Remember, her talking point is country shopping. You cannot country shop. He said, very specifically, you don't have to stay in the first country that you seek refuge in or some bullshit like this. So she goes back to country shopping because she cannot understand in the way that he said it what he means by that, right? All she knows in terms of talking points in her mind is you cannot country shop. So she's just going to repeat what she said. And this is why I think, and this is advice for people at home, when you correct somebody, when you ask a question of somebody, when you're in a conversation with somebody, I think a very good technique is to use the terminology of the other person speaking to you in your response to them. So if Lonerbox would have framed this in terms of country shopping, like, so when you said that you can't go country shopping, I think it's important to make clear to the audience that, and then repeat what he had said, right? And then it would look much dumber if she asked this. And if she asked this as bluntly as she asked it, he has a lot of control over the conversation, right? And now he gets to explain his whole point. He gets more talk time. So if you're ever talking to somebody, using their verbiage, their terminology, I think is good. I don't think it makes too much of a difference between those two statements here, but it is something good to practice when you're talking with people or when you're in a disagreement with people, to use the words that they're using.
Is that like, can you cite where that comes from?
Well, I'm just saying it's the United Nations Convention on Refugees.
Can you read that? Like, I'd be curious.
Yeah, I'll show. Okay, there is a common misconception. I'll find it. I think it was Article 30. My notes for this are fucking enormous.
No, Loner! How are you not ready for this? This is one of your main points. Please don't take too much time. Please do not let her talk a ton, because that is going to hurt what you want to do here. Be very careful, because the more points she puts out here, beyond just the statement about country shopping, the more points you're likely going to have to sort through. I get that this is common misinformation, but I'm disappointed that you're not immediately prepared to answer this. Lauren reframes the right-wing talking points quite abruptly and directly. It helps to fight her when she is direct. Sure. Hold on. So she had already said this, right? It's not like she's like randomly pulling this out of her ass to reframe. She had already said exactly this. So when she's going back to it, just try not to be too rude to her about like quite abruptly and directly. She had already said this. So I don't think it is abrupt or direct to go back to what she had just said in response to what he stated. I don't think that's a fair framing of that. Try to keep in mind that you do not like these right-wing talking points, but like she had already said that. It's not abrupt, like just when you guys say things like this, I'm picking up a whiff of just like disdain. And I think you guys want to keep that in check when you're trying to look at these conversations the way I am, at least.
Certainly I've gone to the European Union a couple times and spoken to people who are policymakers on this, and that was one of the #1 contentions that was always spoken about by policymakers, was the problem of country shopping.
Yeah, but you speak to very specific kinds of policymakers, so let's just bear that in mind, Lauren. It's not like you fucking survey all of the most unbiased sources and all of the academics who are just like giving you the take off the top of their head. You're carefully selecting who you're speaking with. So this point is going to mean very little to me, and it's probably going to mean very little to people that disagree with you, right? This is literally only for people that already believe you in your takes. I don't think many other people would consider your research that you do very helpful because you're completely biased when you do your research. This is actually something that I talked about when I reviewed her conversation with Destiny, is that Lauren has a huge problem, and I even confronted Steven about this because he needs to point this out to her, is she has this problem with research where she goes into it with a point already in mind and picks all of her sources, all of her quotes, everything to just keep on a point that she already believes in. This is the same problem with Ray and proving the shit about blue light, right? Like if you go into research already with a conclusion in mind and you only look to create a body of support for that conclusion, it's not what I would call good research. It's what I would call bad research. So I just have very little faith in her research capabilities. So anytime she says that, it falls on deaf ears for me.
So within Europe, there is the Dublin regulation, which says you don't have to stay in the first safe country, but it'll probably harm your claim if you do. But that's within Europe.
But that's within Europe,
so that's,
right? So that doesn't include Turkey.
Doesn't include Turkey.
Oh no! She was specific about Turkey. Why would you say it doesn't apply to Turkey? Oh no. I'm sure this is less of an optical problem as it's appearing to be line by line, but that's not good.
Even the thing within Europe, you could say the United Nations still has a problem with that because the whole logic of saying you don't have to stay in the first safe country is you're just putting a very arbitrary burden on whichever country is next door, right?
Yeah, but this is your opinion. Oh no. I thought he had this, and now he doesn't have this at all. Giving way too much ground, he has to, because it's not factually correct. Like, I would rather he do this than lie. Like, that's where we get into the point of, like, conversational potential versus, like, strategy. Sure, you could say that he could strategize by not giving away that ground, but this is where I get into conversational potential. If you know it's incorrect, concede on it, right? And if he has to concede because Lauren knows this a little bit better than him and she knows that this doesn't apply to Turkey, then he's going to have to concede that. I would rather him do that than lie. But it's unfortunate because she was very specific about Turkey, but he had this point and immediately had to give back on it because it doesn't apply to Turkey. Don't say misdirect. I'm getting upset with you guys. She's the one misdirecting to Europe. Like, she has what she wants to accomplish in this conversation, and she is doing, whether you think it's unfortunate or not, a very good job about it.
If the nearest safe country is a country of like 5 million people and they're massively in debt, then it would make sense as an international community to allow people there to move onwards. So that's why the idea of safe third countries, and I mentioned this in the video as well, but there's also the whole thing. Yeah, so that's the thing about, I'm trying to find this fucking, where is it?
Because obviously that really does, that's one thing that I spoke to a lot of migrants about when I was on the ground.
And here she goes. And because you're looking shit up, she gets to keep talking, which is what you lefty people really don't want her to be able to do. And she's just going to get to keep talking.
They were like, man, we really, and we didn't film all of it because obviously a ton of migrants told us like, no, we're not comfortable being on footage. We don't want to be filmed. And we respected that. We really made sure we only filmed people, especially if they were migrating and potentially, you know, escaping a violent regime. in some cases, because I do believe genuine refugees exist within that. Well, I think the majority are typically just migrating for economic reasons. And when we were talking to people off camera that didn't necessarily want to be filmed, they were quite often telling us like, man, like, yeah, we were really screwed over being told we could actually get refugee status in these countries. We were really screwed over being given this false information that we were going to be given somewhere to live, be given asylum, because we're being told we're illegal migrants, especially because the traffickers will tell them to destroy their passports, so they actually have no way to even apply. And to be fair to the governments, how are you supposed to give refugee status to someone who has no ability, isn't from a refugee, designated country, has no ability to prove who they are, and has zero ability to prove what their background is or even their identity?
Okay, how is Loner going to respond to this? Is he going to respond to anything that she just said, or is he going to go back to the UN thing? Let's see.
I covered that as well. Like, there are supposed to be international laws around assisting people who don't have documents, because there can actually be a few reasons. Like, some of it can be you can be from a country that is absolutely riddled with human rights abuses, but you can be going to a country like Italy where they consider Libya a safe country, which it absolutely isn't. So
Okay.
yeah, like you can have, but again, like that's just more of like kind of separate issue. I can send you that law of, but yeah, that is like something that I covered.
This is a good place to explain what I mean by I like Lonerbox's videos, but I don't think he's as capable in debate. She has put forward now a bunch of different points, and he is behind on referencing the UN thing. He is behind on referencing these points that she just made. He's got a lot of things that he needs to refute. Mentioning that he had already said this in the video, telling her that he could send her this information in the future. All of this is not important. All of this is not helpful, right? Because we have to be able to do this in the moment. He's starting to do this in the moment, and I will rewind and I will listen to it. But those references to his own video, or those references to things that he could send in the future, do not help him in the present with the conversation, right? I think part of the ability of a good debater is to reference things in the moment. Steven, Destiny, really, really good at this, I think. I think it's one of his strong suits. I'm really important, really, really good at this. One of his strong suits. They're able to immediately go back to internalize information and references that they have about something. Destiny demonstrates this really well in his talks about COVID recently, right? He has an understanding that he's developed of how the vaccines work, how the virus works, talking points from right-wingers about that stuff, and he can in real time navigate that conversation without the need to pause the whole thing to look something up or search his memory for what the right answer is. Same with I'm really important. When somebody says something that's not true or is BS, he can fact check them on the spot because he has internalized a deep understanding of these different political connections, positions, and the inner workings of government. So being able to reference that on the fly is something that makes you a really good debater. Not being able to is less so, right? Needing to look through an info document, less so. Like if you're not able to come up with those things quickly, it can hurt your performance, right? Lauren's audience will not be impressed because she made her points and he either concedes or sends her more details later. Exactly.
The article in the UN law is contracting states shall not impose penalties on account of their illegal entry or presence on refugees who coming directly from a territory where their life or freedom was threatened. So that's why the term coming directly gets misconstrued, but then there are separate UN articles where they explain that coming directly is based on whether or not they claimed asylum and got settled. So if they claimed asylum and got settled in Turkey and then destroyed that and tried to go somewhere else, that would be a crime.
Okay,
that
so
would be. But if they just got to Turkey and then decided to move afterwards before claiming asylum, that's fine.
Okay, so I see what you mean there, and that actually tends to be a big problem is they won't actually apply, not as in they won't apply, they'll try, but they won't have the actual background to be able to get refugee status in a country because they don't have a genuine claim to it. So then they'll try to country shop and see which country will let them claim it because they don't actually have a claim.
So she's saying that's a problem. She's trying to drag him in to say that that's not a problem, which I don't think that Lonerbox will necessarily do. And if he does, it'll be an opinion thing, the same as it being an opinion thing for her. But she's saying doesn't contradict what he's saying. Like, she is saying that this allowance that Lonerbox is described as a problem, but kind of implied in there is that she agrees that Lonerbox's description of things is factually correct. So let's see how Lonerbox navigates this. Is he going to give his own prescription about the importance of that allowance, or is he going to make clear and get her to double down on that being the reality of things? Is he going to bring up the way that she thought about it before with country shopping not being allowed and talk about how that's not true? He has a lot of different options here.
That tends to be the problem there, which is a big question I wanted to ask you. Do you see a difference between migrants and refugees, and do you think that difference is important?
Oh man, no. So remember what I said when I gave advice to Lonerbox, that if you're going to respond to something that she's asking, that you have to put your question at the end to make sure that the last foot of that statement is something that's going to keep the conversation moving in a direction you want. Here is Lauren doing that exactly here. So she said all this stuff in response to Lonerbox, but ends it with the direction that she wants to go. Now the ball is in Lonerbox's court. He's going to have to probably respond to what she just asked. Whether or not he brings it back to this point and emphasizes it or does something with it, though, I'm not sure. I hope that he does, but my guess would be that he doesn't.
Yeah, I mentioned that as well. Yeah, don't worry. Yeah.
Sorry, yeah, we'll
I just thought, so for you'll probably notice, I feel like I'm just repeating my own script. You'll probably notice that I used migrant and refugee kind of interchangeably in that video.
Yeah,
because
it's a big pet peeve of mine.
It's a pet peeve of mine as well. And it's because that's what they are at sea. You don't know. NGOs can't assess someone's legal state. Even Mare Nostrum didn't have the power to assess legal status of someone they rescued. They take them to the country, whichever they're registered to, or just whichever country respects the dignity of those saved. And then the country decides whether or not they're a refugee or a migrant. So that's why you can't really call them either. Which
so
is
why do you use refugee then? When you
I use migrant as well.
It's a bit biased.
No, I've used both.
I think he had a little bit of an optical stumbly boy with the yeah, it's a pet peeve of mine too, but you still do it. I wouldn't have admitted it was a pet peeve. I would have just explained that I use both interchangeably, so that because people have different ideas of what both of these things are, and technically they exist simultaneously as both things at once. A little bit of a Schrodinger's cat, but Schrodinger's immigrant.
I don't think there's ever been a boat that had 100% no refugees. I don't think I've seen that anywhere. I don't know,
because there would be a lot. I mean, any boat with the majority North Africans, which we've seen, absolutely would be people that would not have, a lot anyways, would not have legitimate claim.
Yeah, well, but again, the point is here is that we're talking about what happens at sea, and the idea is at sea. How do you find out? You don't send them back. You find out by processing them in a country where they can be processed.
The ideal thing here, as somebody who's completely uninformed, so take my opinion with a big grain of salt, can we not have some kind of term that is neither of these things, which imply a decision that we couldn't make? So what we're saying here is there are people on a boat that come to a country, and they are Schrodinger's immigrant or Schrodinger's refugee. We need to sort them in the country. We need to open the box to know if they're one thing or the other. And until they get there, they could be one thing or the other. So they're treated as both. I think it should be treated as a third thing. Is there not some third term we could use to describe the people who have not been sorted into whether or not they're a refugee or not? Like asylum seekers. There we go. Why don't we just call them asylum seekers? I feel like we should just land on some third term.
But how do you process people who are destroying their identification and lying?
There are processes to that. Like it does take a long time, but there are ways around that. Like that. I mean, this is like there are UN articles about this and what you're supposed to do.
But can you see that people are deliberately doing this to make it difficult to ascertain who they are, perhaps because they don't actually fit into refugee status?
Of course I can, and that's why it's a crime.
I love it. Okay, honesty to a fault, right? Perhaps to a fault. But this is where my idea of like conversational potential comes above maybe what is strategically best for people. So you guys asked where that line was. Here's an example of me going to the conversational potential more than I am the strategy. This may not help Lonerbox necessarily, but I think it's good to be honest about this. She is asking for what has to be like a basic concession. You have to concede on this, or you're going to get into a whole whole argument about it when you don't really mean to, when you agree with her. If you get into a point where you've been cornered and you realize you have to admit to something, just admit to it. Because in my opinion, it looks much worse and hurts the potential of the conversation to just lie, okay? It really does. Or to waste time arguing stupid shit. So I like this. Thank you for the concession. This is probably good.
These vetting processes are pretty like interrogatory, aren't they? Like they grill them pretty hard to find these things out. And most refugees, like they come on their own because it's very dangerous to come with your family across the Mediterranean. They come on their own, and then you have to find out who their family is. And if they give you a name and you can't find who they are, then they get stuck as well. So like even people who do that get stuck in a gray zone, and that can become quite difficult for all parties, which is why I think that's like a problem with the smuggling business, which is why I think you agree with me that Mare Nostrum should come back.
Good loop around. Okay. Got a reaction out of her. We'll see what that reaction is in a second.
Because smugglers should not be doing this. I think rescue missions are fine. It turns out that there was actually something in the BBC just yesterday that there are people crossing on dinghies that they just they just buy them and then go themselves because they can't find smugglers. So that's what the rescue missions are for, is for people who are going to come regardless of what's happening. But yeah, absolutely, like smugglers, like getting people to destroy their documents is insane. Like they shouldn't be doing that.
Yeah, and to me, like, is obviously, and this is something that people really misunderstand, and I think I don't agree with how you portrayed it. You were kind of like, yeah, Lauren thinks it's based and awesome that people just, shut down missions to help people. Like, of course I don't want people drowning, and that's why I personally support the Australian system, which has led to 0 people drowning. But that doesn't work if you just get rid of the NGOs. You actually have to.
I have a question about that then.
Oh boy, here we go. We're going to talk about the Australian system.
Italy tried to do something very similar to this. What they did was do you know the memorandum that they did with Libya? The Coast Guard?
Explain it.
So Salvini signed, I think it was actually pre-Salvini, but they signed a memorandum with Libya, basically getting them to, do you have your headphones on?
I do. I'm just grabbing.
Yeah, you just moved it. Okay. They signed a memorandum with Libya, the Libyan Coast Guard, saying that they would financially support Libyans to rescue people and then bring them back to Libya. That was like their border policing strategy, right?
Okay, so wait, they would pay sorry, can you explain that? I hurt myself trying to open my beer. I apologize.
The Italian, it's an interesting technique. The Italians paid the Libyan Coast Guard to intercept migrants/refugees to bring them back to Libya. They were supporting the Libyan Coast Guard to intercept people on dinghy boats and bring them back to Libya.
Yeah. They do things like that anyways everywhere without any sort. Like when I was in Turkey, there were gendarmes looking for us when we were on the water, like in helicopters. So they tend to, like, border security tends to happen both ways in countries like that because the smuggling is so bad for Libya and Turkey as well. But like that, to me, from my understanding, that happens anyways. Like it was happening when I was in Morocco too. When I was talking to the traffickers, they were like, "Oh, we keep monitoring of when the Moroccan Coast Guard are in certain areas for when we launch our boats."
So my question to you is that like what you, assuming that like the smuggling business in Libya is massive, it's not really comparable to Australia where I think the numbers of smuggling is comparatively lower because Libya is a big country. So I'm just wondering what you
there's
think
a
should
lot
be
of
done
smuggling that does happen from Asia.
So my question is,
good shit. Do not get lost on this. Then you're gonna have to bring up fucking per capita this and fucking shoreline this and number of people caught that. Like to really contradict her on what she just said about like, well, there's still plenty of people coming from Asia. It would be a whole conversation that you don't want to have. Very good on you for not fucking falling into that. That is praiseworthy because some people get very distracted on that shit.
So if you're intercepting people who are supposedly, they say are fleeing war or terror or whatever, and you stop them making that journey or just send them back, then where the question is like, you might be stopping drowning. I don't really know about Australia. I didn't look into that. But if you apply that to Europe, then the question becomes, if they're not drowning, then where are they going? And in the case of Libya, which Generation Identity wanted to do. They wanted to send them back to Libya. Well, in the case of Libya, you end up in a detention center where you are raped, tortured, abused, you have a forced disappearance, you're trafficked within Africa. Basically, like, you didn't drown, but you might as well be dead.
Does she not believe that? I don't know about this furrowing. What do you think happens to the people that are sent back to Libya, Lauren? Oh, fuck. I never really thought about that. I mean, I know Libya's a hellhole, but, yeah, what happens to all those people on the boats? Fuck them, dude. They're fucking immigrants. Get a visa. Fucking denied. I don't know. Well, I wonder what she's thinking. I wonder what's going on up there.
If you get intercepted by the Libyan Coast Guard and brought back to Libya, that's your life over. You're just a sack of meat with no human rights.
Okay, so see that's an interesting question, because is that not a problem with the Libyan system in general, as with many systems worldwide, many that don't qualify for refugee status but just have extremely, authoritarian regimes in most of the world, rather than that of enforcing.
It almost makes you wonder, why do we have this whole refugee system and people leave and then we classify their country as so fucking bad that then we give them refugees? I feel like she's so close.
Well, it's an authoritarian regime that Italy is supporting, though, and that Generation Identity was happy to send rescuees back to before determining their migration status. So if Generation Identity was rescuing people who they didn't know were refugees.
We're at a fight here. Both of us are grabbing for the mic. Who is going to get to complete their statement? Does she get to say some shit, or are you going to make her wait and finish what you're saying?
This is actually something that's really interesting to me. What do you think would happen to you if you were a refugee caught leaving Turkey by the gendarme, or a migrant or a refugee caught leaving Turkey by the gendarme and brought in?
I don't know. I didn't look into Turkey. Probably bad, right?
Well, that's the thing. There's an assumption that you'll be treated horribly by these countries, right? Mm-hmm. They're these horrible persecution countries that... so I was arrested by the gendarme.
Well, funny we get around to that question that I posed, because I got an anecdote to answer that one. I was taken captive by the Johnny Dharmas, and not so great. Interesting. Okay. You may hate the anecdote stuff, but boy is she good at knowing where she's gonna go and getting to it. Like, put aside your hate for her for a moment. There's an art to being able to do this in real time all the time, and she is good at doing that, right? Think what you will of the technique, think what you will of where she arrives at the end of these anecdotes, but like, she's very good at fitting them into a conversation. And I don't know, that's what stands out to me here.
We were found on illegal border territory. We didn't realize it was illegal territory. We were trying to get filming of the border, and they arrested us as though we were migrants trying to leave the country. And even more so, I was with two gay film guys, and I am a woman who has done quite a lot of anti-Islam commentary. We were terrified, to say the least, right? And one of the big assumptions was, as a critic of Islam with two gay film guys, we are going to be screwed. This is like Midnight Express. We're going to go to jail. What actually happened is we were brought in by the military. We were held for a while, questioned. They actually brought in a doctor to check and make sure our health was okay, and we hadn't been beaten or attacked or anything happened to us by the guards. I remember her walking in and almost falling backwards. She was so shocked to see that we were white, because she's like, I'm so used to dealing with, migrants that are like Middle Eastern, not white people trying to cross borders. But she's like, yeah, it's my full-time job. I come in and make sure everyone's healthy. They gave us chicken, they gave us cookies and cigarettes, and the questioning part was a bit more serious and intense after like 10 hours of being told we might face jail time. But we were actually treated really, really well. So I do wonder, and you know what? I was pulled in for questioning in Morocco too, where
What are you suggesting here?
He's lost. Hey, it wasn't that bad. That's what I'm saying. All right, I thought Turkey, fucking shithole country, fucking fucking hates gays, hates whites, hates criticism. Not too bad. That's all I'm saying. It's not too bad. That's what I'm saying. I said nothing about Libya. I'm saying I know some Turkish people. I went in Morocco, got in trouble in Morocco. That was fine. What happened in the UK? Fucking banned. All right? That's all I'm saying. Okay, fucking civilized Western countries, and I get banned. And what happens in Turkey? Absolutely fucking nothing. Absolutely nothing. Firm handshakes, so we're all okay. Okay, that's all I'm saying. Okay. I think that's what her point is.
I'm about to finish here. Morocco, I saw someone get beaten by the police when I was pulled in for questioning, which was horrific, but I also saw people just being talked to. What I'm suggesting is, like, does that exact thing happen in every single scenario? Like, I'll have to look into it a bit more, but is that like the protocol of the Libyan police that if you are caught on a dinghy and we bring you back, we rape you and beat you, and that is like indefinitely your fate?
What I'm saying is, Lonerbox, can you get me some kind of, I know you're a guy that likes documents, okay? You got the fucking glasses, you like reading, he's citing all this fucking bullshit in this video. Can you show me some kind of like police training manual where it says that when you bring them off the dinghy, you gotta fucking rape them? Can you bring me something that says we treat them like a meat bag? Because all I'm saying is, wasn't too bad in Turkey. People said it was bad. It wasn't too bad. People said Morocco was bad. Yeah, one guy was getting beat, okay? But they were talking to other people, and talking isn't something you would do to a meat bag, believe me. So what I'm asking is, can you substantiate that? It seems like you're making some very big claims about the procedures of the Libyan police there, buddy. I don't think he's going to be able to provide anything like that. And all of a sudden, this kind of offhanded bunch of remarks he made about Libya, how is he going to handle this? He clearly can't provide that kind of information. I don't think it was his intention when he made those statements. And now he is in this tight spot that she has securely fastened him into, that he couldn't have seen the entire time she was talking about this. So it's just sprung on him. He didn't see this coming. How is Lonerbox going to handle this?
What is the research and data on that? Like, I don't doubt in some cases that does happen and that is horrific, but is that the actual protocol? What, like, do you have... I just feel like there are a lot of...
Well, like if they have a guidebook saying you should beat the shit out of refugees, or just whether or not it happens, because there was a spike after that memorandum was drawn up. There was a spike in detentions and detention-related abuses in Libyan detention centers. So, yeah, like, I mean, okay, let's say it happens to what, like 10% of the people who are intercepted. That's still you sending, like, people who you haven't determined the migration status of. You don't know whether they're legit or not, but you've sent them to a dangerous situation.
Good. So first of all, there's not going to be a protocol. Second of all, statistically, these things have gone up. Third of all, back to my original point, we need to sort these people out when they arrive in the country. We shouldn't be making this sorting out, this decision as to whether or not they qualify on the high seas where it's not meant to happen. They should go to the country, be sorted. If they go back, they need to go back. But if they get a stay, then they get a stay. You can't determine these things out on the high seas and then send these people back like prematurely like that. So good on him.
By the way, Libya is decided by the UN to not be a safe port. They emphatically say you can't send people you rescue back to Libya.
He did the parry, he did the twist, and he fucking slapped her. She was like, was that your foot? He's like, yeah, watch. And he did the two, just like that fucking hairdresser guy. Lonerbox out here spitting. All right, let's see how she handles this.
Okay, when was that brought in? Because for me, it's all about like actually applying the maritime law, actually applying the migration law. So if it is...
What's the maritime law again?
Well, first of all, you know, you have to return people to the closest safe port. So if that is Turkey, you return them to Turkey.
Asked her for the law. She gives the law. That's not the law. Oh, she's on the fucking back foot, dude. She took that foot to the face, and then she fucking threw a fist, and he grabbed it, and he fucking Aikido flipped her. Oh, shit. This is turning around very quickly. All right, how is this going to work out here?
So you don't have to...
Sorry, go on.
Okay, you know, not migrating when you have no refugee status. And how do you, like, This is always a big question to me.
Hold on, that seems like it conflicts with everything. You wouldn't migrate already having the refugee status, right? You could seek the refugee status in the country that you arrive in, and then the country would determine it, right? I'm no fucking expert. That is my understanding of it from everything that Lonerbox has said so far that you've agreed to. So she said that shit, now she's changing topics. Let's see where she goes. He let her do this because he let her continue speaking. So instead of doing the Aikido flip, he caught her arm and he pushed her. Okay, so you just let her go. Let's see what she does now that she's let go.
If I am at sea and I leave a certain country and that country is potentially unsafe, like Libya, for me to be returned to, what happens if their passport has been destroyed?
Now she's looping it back. Okay, so she's getting back in this fighting position. She's winding up, right? The same thing we would expect Lonerbox to do. Let's be good faith. This is her point. This is the where she wants to go with it. She is sticking it back and bringing it back to that. Let's see how these two conflict here.
What happens here if they come over and they, won't tell you where they're from? They have no claim to refugee status. The problem is that you are getting an unprecedented amount of people that can't be identified.
Oh no, now she's just getting his speed points again. She winded up for it. He got ready. And now she's just dropping, and now she's saying all this other shit, and he's just gonna let her. Okay.
If you return to their original point of wherever they came from, you are told that you are cruel and horrible and condemning people to death, even if you're not. So how do you enforce any laws? How do you enforce any sort of system that keeps people out before they've shown their passport or proved who they are, when anyone can essentially dub themselves a refugee in danger by just going into the Mediterranean? Okay. Now we're being fair. We're tossing something out there. Okay, so she has a very baseline problem with, like, how do we enforce immigration then, if this is the way that you've described it? Kind of an amorphous question. Let's see how Lonerbox handles this here.
I think it's like just over half of people get their asylum claims accepted and the rest of them get rejected. So it's actually it's a pretty strict process. But then again, that also means that a lot of people crossing the sea, so given that the sea, the central Mediterranean, is the most dangerous journey. So you'd expect the numbers of genuine refugees in there to probably be higher, but I can't prove that.
Yeah, someone made a good point in the chat too. They were like, if you stop the boats, they won't enter Libya to begin with and put themselves in that danger. That's true
because although people already face risk of getting intercepted, they still cross.
Right,
and
because
when
the borders are open too.
Which borders?
Because it's not like the Australian policy. If you try to enter the country, you'll just be sent to Christmas Island. If you try to enter Australia, you won't be allowed in the country whatsoever. So while there are still countries that are allowing people entry, they're still going to keep crossing. So you need to end both. And your comparison I watched at the beginning with Mare Nostrum and Triton 1 is just simply, there was only a 7% difference in actual drowning. Still horrific, of course, but that graph makes it seem like way different. And one of the big reasons that increased the amount of drownings wasn't because there was less search missions by Mare Nostrum. It was because they started using more dinghy boats at the time, and dinghy boats unfortunately increased over time compared to fishing boats, and they're 20 times as dangerous compared to fishing boats. That's one other possible explanation. Of course, there's also the fact that significantly less traffickers were being arrested.
Yeah, I mean, the dinghy boats doesn't correlate exactly, because there was an increase in 2016 of dinghy boats. It went from 67 to 82%, but then NGO presence was higher in 2017 than 2016, but then dinghy boats dropped. So they don't really connect at all.
Dinghy boats went up with Triton 1, which is when the drownings happened.
Well, the dinghy boats
since then.
The dinghy boats, well, they went up and then dropped. They went up and dropped because for a period in 2016, the smuggling hub was moved to Sabratha in Libya, where the militias had control. And the thing with militias is they can smuggle whoever they want on whatever boat they want, and the customers can't complain. So that's kind of where that actually fits better, because the rescue mission correlation, it correlates for 1 year, but then it goes negative the other, so it doesn't really fit.
So this is a classic correlation causation thing, right? She thinks that the cause of the number going down was because of the drownings on this Triton thing that she's referencing. He's connecting it to something internally within Libya.
I want to bring you back, actually, if you don't mind. You were wrong about the next port of safety.
Good remembering, because he tried to make this point earlier and was interrupted. So good shit from Lonerbox here.
The term that the UN uses is next port of call, which can mean the next port of safety. But they also actually say at the end that there are plenty of instances where this is unclear. Like, they actually say it's unclear. But the overriding concern is the safety and dignity of the crew and the people rescued, which is why it's very contentious sending people to North Africa, because first of all, like, Libya is obviously not a safe port. It's a disaster, which is why I'm still so confused about why Generation Identity wanted to send them there. And then Egypt has had like kind of authoritarian problems. And then Algeria, well, they recently deported a bunch of migrants without due process. Tunisia, I think, actually has a chance, but they don't really have an asylum process at the moment, so it would probably be useful to start funding that instead of Libya. But
good job on this. He's appearing very, very knowledgeable about this. She's Googling and half listening. Let's see.
Yeah, that's why, and obviously different EU countries have different impressions of what a safe country is. But again, I wonder if like what you're saying we should do when these people are rescued, because the first big spike in refugees happened in 2011 when there wasn't a refugee response, but that was because the Libyan civil war happened. So I think the problem with pull factors is you're actually ignoring like push factors, like why do people leave? Because even on a good year, your chance of dying in the Mediterranean is 1 in 50. Even when all the rescue missions were there, you are 1 in 50 chance of dying.
It's so good that he's getting to talk and talk and talk. She's been able to talk and talk and talk. Any opportunity that Lonerbox cuts out for himself to do that, even if it's because she's Googling and shit, he should take advantage of. We saw this before when Lonerbox had to Google that stuff about the UN and about the EU, and she got to talk and talk and talk. Take advantage of that. If she has to Google shit, if she's confused, talk and talk and talk. Spread your thing. Create your points, right? Lay down a foundation as quickly as possible. If you're building a sandcastle and you're going to be at the beach all day and it's low tide when you get there, use the low tide as the moment to build up as much of that sandcastle as you can. Put in the moats, put in the walls, and then start building the stuff that's intricate and important to you, because the more defenses you put up, when that high tide comes back and she takes back control and she's able to talk and talk and talk, maybe those defenses, maybe those things that you put out there earlier when it was low tide are going to help you keep these arguments, keep that castle secure. So let's hope that that's the case here.
When you've got a genuine refugee crisis, I obviously think that's a very different question, but certainly in like 2016, 2017, when I was covering this stuff, like the majority of people that I was meeting in refugee camps were, you know, not from Syria, not from Libya. They were coming from countries which were not listed as refugee countries. And that's because these traffickers...
Listed by who?
Like not in a current state of civil war or war in general, and like actively listed as being able to apply for refugee status, which is why there are so many people living under bridges in Europe and living in camps not with refugee status all over the place. And this is another aspect that is really horrific. Like Camp Moria that I went to was burned down just this year because people were so sick of being there. They were like, I'd rather be back in Turkey right now.
And she brings it back to the anecdotes. Okay.
It just becomes a pay your way through system. Can you actually afford that? That's what it becomes when it becomes through the smuggler system. It isn't, are you an actual refugee? It's, can you afford to pay for the best trip over? And then once you get to Greece, can you afford to pay the doctor for a fake doctor's note that says you need to go to Athens? And then can you afford to pay a lawyer to make a good argument for you, even if you don't have the data? Like, it actually kind of bastardizes the entire process for getting refugee status, sadly. But I do have to ask... And
we bring it back around at the end, and now the important part starts.
Do you understand that there needs to be a limited... this is unfortunate, like I'm still saying definitely some, but do you understand that there needs to be a limited amount of dependents brought into a country under refugee status in order for that system to function?
What do you mean by dependence?
So people who obviously are in refugee status are typically leaving their country in a moment's notice. Right now, it wouldn't be somewhere within Europe. There's no country in Europe that is in an active war, other than, I mean, you could maybe argue Ukraine. But so typically people are migrating to countries where they don't necessarily speak the language, they have no connections, in a lot of cases no family, if you're a genuine refugee, no money to pay for a home in a lot of cases, somewhere to live. You need support, undeniably. You're not going to be able to just waltz in and get a job right away. So do you recognize that for these people to enter a country and for them to be genuinely supported and put into a position where they can continue to live their own life in a meaningful way, that number has to be limited to a certain amount?
Yeah, that's why I think this first safe country thing is really stupid, because what happened in Europe was that you had this concentration in it's southern Italy and southern Spain.
Good. Yes, good, Lonerbox, good. She believes this thing. She thinks there needs to be a number, blah, blah, blah. Aikido, flip her around, use that momentum, say that's why that previous idea that you seem to be so fond of is stupid. Good, good. Let's see how you flip this around, though. It's all about the follow-up, Loner.
Places with massive economic issues and debts and all that couldn't handle more people, whereas they could have easily gone up to places whether it was France or Germany or northern Spain or even the UK, where
no more French braids. We bring them to France. That's not good. No more French braids and baguettes. Big brown people neighborhood. No good. Nope, not France. Okay, yeah, we get it. Loading anecdote.
Mate, they're right now, massively full in Italy, massively full in Germany.
Italy bolsters his point, right? His point is this first country idea is dumb, and that these people should then be sent to countries that could support them, right? They shouldn't all end up in the first countries, because the countries with coasts that are connected to these other countries are just going to get fucked and flooded, and they're not the best to receive them, right?
Back in 2015, they were all packed in Porte de la Chapelle, and that right on the border, and they were all packed in. Sorry, Porte de la Chapelle wasn't near the border. That's. Oh my goodness, this is where I got arrested. Why can't I remember the name of it?
Have you forgotten anecdote? Oh. Major misstep from Lauren here.
You have to remember where you get arrested.
I know. How could I not remember this?
Too many times, huh?
Starts with a C. I'm going to get a map up here, but Porte de la Chapelle was Paris.
She had a misfire, dude. She loaded up that anecdote and she got a fucking jam. Oh, no. Oh, my fucking anecdote gun. What the fuck? I swear to God, this doesn't usually happen. I can usually unload the whole fucking clip at once.
Again, that's why I would say that what the EU should have done, the EU should have actually been able to gather their resources in a much more useful way. Calais, yeah. Which is why the EU should have been able to pull their resources a lot better, so they could allocate people more evenly and in a much more pragmatic way. Whereas right now, you have
what is
one
a much
country
more pragmatic way? What is that?
A pragmatic way is one thing is getting rid of work bans on people who are currently seeking asylum. So if your asylum claim is still happening in the UK, you're not allowed to work, which is stupid. These people want to work generally. And then the other thing is just actually looking at ways that different countries might not have the infrastructure to take refugees and other countries do. I don't buy for 1 second, by the way, that Germany is full. There have been refugee crises throughout the centuries of millions of people arriving in countries of less than 15 million people. And economies can function like that because you add workers to the economy.
I think the problem there is typically people who have come in, they actually don't even have the capability to work, because in Paris, maybe a bit different. And this was actually quite sad, because obviously a lot of people coming from different countries in Africa that had previously been colonized by the French could speak French, so they could actually speak the language, but they just had no legitimate claim to asylum. So they couldn't get any papers, they couldn't work because they had no actual right to migrate there.
I feel like we've completely missed the mark on the point that Loner made. So if their shit's being processed, then they should be able to, in the meantime, get a job so that they aren't homeless on the fucking streets and dirtying shit up like you videotaped, or, fucking stuck in a country with no prospects or unable to pay their way through because they have no income, right? All of the problems you're talking about could be remedied, at least in part, by allowing them to seek gainful employment while their stuff is being processed, right? And not having these documents they're still going to process them. They're going to try to figure out who the fuck they are, where they're coming from, whatever, even if they destroy these documents, which if they find out they did is illegal and they will be in trouble, right? So like it doesn't conflict with what he's saying. And what he's saying is not they should have like no immigration laws or whatever. He's saying that you should allow people to work while they're processing their refugee status, right? Like I feel like this doesn't have anything to do with that.
Well, that's what I think. That's why I think that's a problem with Paris, with France, and a lot of these countries that are drumming up anti-immigrant sentiment is they're not really thinking about pragmatism. That whole thing of like just leaving undocumented people under bridges is a waste. Like those people want to work. That's what they said
you
to you. They said
understand why you can't give someone status who hasn't applied for it, right? You understand why you can't just have no immigration laws. Because every single person worldwide would want to move to France immediately. That was in a poor country. And I'm not saying, like, it sucks that there's a large amount of the world that has been born in impoverished countries. That's horrible. We want to change that situation. But you can only have so many people that migrate into your country that are largely going to be dependent. So you can't change your migration laws just because someone's already there. Oh, you already came? Well, I guess shrug our shoulders, we'll just give you the right to work and live here if you don't actually fit into the status, because then that opens up for everyone. I'll just come over from India, I'll just come over from China, I'll come over from Canada, and can I be French now and work and live here even though I haven't put in any application?
Okay, now she's bringing it back around. Now I kind of get it. I feel like it's not the full picture, but we'll see how Lonerbox responds to it.
That wouldn't fly anywhere in the world. Doesn't matter if it's a European country or not. I wouldn't expect any country to do that for me. I wouldn't move to India and say, hey, give me citizenship because I'm already here anyway.
Well, this didn't happen, though, because when the Balkan route opened, most people stayed in Syria and Jordan and Lebanon and Turkey.
Nice! He's got fucking historical citations. He said some shit I don't even know about. Sounds legit. If she doesn't challenge it, I'll assume that it's correct. We'll see how she responds to this, if she even knows what the fuck that thing is.
The vast majority of refugees did not enter Europe from the refugee crisis. Barely.
Yeah.
And even when the Balkan route opened, even when Viktor Orban, that fucking dipshit, was like basically directing people into West.
You're on such a good roll. Why would you do that? I don't know who the fuck that person is, but he just randomly said this dumb shit. Like, just, we don't need that. We don't need that shit at all. I have no idea who that dude is, but he talks so calmly and so precisely, and then just randomly pulls out the fucking dipshit. Like, I don't even know who the fuck that is, right? Like, we don't need to give her any footholds to grasp onto to interrupt this, right? All she needs is one fucking factoid and 3 anecdotes, and then she could take the mic back for 15 more minutes about whatever it is that she wants to talk about, right? So that's all she has to do. And, okay, Hungarian nationalists. How familiar do we think that Lauren Southern is with a Hungarian nationalist? So all it takes is a few anecdotes and some information for her to interrupt and go, well, here's the thing is like, oh, Orban was actually responsible for like blah, 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 blah. As a matter of fact, when I was in Hungary with this project who actually work with helping immigrants, which is something you would like, actually Orban's policies, if I remember rightly, was blah, 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 and blah, 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 blah. And then she just gets to keep going. So you're giving her a foothold that you don't need to give her by letting your rhetoric slip like that. So it's not good for Lonerbox to do that, right? Yeah, chat started going off. I don't know who this person is. You guys clearly dislike them. Lonerbox does too. That's no mystery to me. He made it very clear. But I'm saying is you're giving her an opportunity that you don't need to give her. You're clearly controlling your inflection and your language through the rest of this. Be consistent on that, because that is definitely helping you here, and you don't want to give her an opportunity to butt in.
Even basically directing people with his little half-built walls into Western Europe. Like when he was doing that, people stayed in Lebanon and other places anyway.
His people didn't want mass migration in their country.
This is what I'm talking about.
Are they not allowed to have their opinion and vote on that?
I think if you want to be part of the European Union, then yeah, you should probably abide by international laws. Yeah.
Please keep talking. Please keep talking. She's Googling. Now is your chance. We're in low tide. Please build something, Lonerbox. Please. You just dug a channel in the middle of your wall, and now she's going to try to squeeze through it. So please plug that up. Please do something with this modicum of time that you have. Please. Loner! Say something, brother. Please.
So you think that the European Union should have more power than the people within a country?
No, now we have this conversation. Now we go off on a whole fucking random tangent that Laura wants to go off on. Fucking Lonerbox. You've dropped the ball, my friend. You've dropped the ball. Hopefully this isn't as disastrous as it could be.
On some things, yeah.
On some things, including who should be allowed to enter their country?
When it comes to refugees, yeah.
Well, we're talking
Because
about migrants.
No, we're talking about people who are making
people who have
claims.
not been decided, and in a lot of cases they're moving once again through these countries because their refugee status has been rejected in the first country.
Well, how do you
because they aren't actually refugees in a lot of cases.
Well, no, you're just speaking to like a few examples that you found. You don't know if someone is a refugee or a migrant until they claim asylum. So you need to give them the opportunity to claim asylum.
Good to focus on this point, though she clearly still doesn't understand this. Maybe clarifying this more would be helpful. I feel like it's very contrary to the entire perspective she's putting forward, so I don't know how willing she is to educate herself on this topic. Given all of her other work, I would assume she doesn't really care about getting educated on that topic, but it might be good to clarify this. I know this is a point that's been repeated several times, but I wonder how well this is sticking in the mind of her viewers in particular. So it might be good to flesh that out a little bit more, but I do appreciate the pushback from Loner here.
We have laws against existing in a country and not claiming asylum. That actually incurs deportation. So, again, how do you know unless they can't arrive? Because what you're saying, and it seems like what Generation Identity is saying,
I have friends of mine that are like refugees that have immigrated, for example, to Australia, Bosnia, and they were part of, their families were in a lot of the wars that were going on in Eastern Europe. And you know, they were able to put claims in before they actually left their country to go to the new country, and that happens in a lot of cases. In fact, that's typically how refugee claims occur.
No, that can happen. It's not typically how claims occur.
Okay,
because
so
what if
not
the embassy...
typically.
Cool. We got a concession from Lauren. Maybe it's not most of the time that that's the case, but some of the times it is the case. Lonerbox could push back here and say that maybe in situations like Libya, it is a less practical option for most of the people that are impacted. Like maybe most people can't apply through the Libyan government, like to the country that they want to arrive in, right? Let's see how he handles this.
But that is a possibility, and probably looking at the crisis occurring right now is the better form of making an application than ending up in Camp Moria and having it burned down because you're so miserable where you are and you can't get status because you found out you don't actually have a right to asylum, even though your human trafficker told you would.
Yeah, so again, like if you can claim asylum through an embassy, people would do that rather than risk a 1 in 50 chance of dying across the sea. Because the thing with the embassy, like you said, it's an option. They don't have to do that. And you probably have to assume that every journey into Europe is dangerous. Even the Balkan route is dangerous. So if they're not claiming asylum in an embassy and just coming over instead, it's because that's their human right. That's their right under international law. So again, it's an option to claim at assembly.
So what would you do? What would you do about the mass amounts of people? And I do remember reading European Union data. I'd have to go back and find it, saying it was actually the majority who were coming over for economic reasons at one point in around 2016, 2017. What would you do about those who are attempting to make refugee claims, but they're actually just economic migrants?
Well, if your refugee claim fails, then you get deported. That should be the case anyway.
So just send them all back?
Not all of them, the ones who fail their claims, yeah.
Yeah, so you'd get them on airplanes and send them home? What if they've destroyed their passports so you don't know what home is for them?
Wait, why is she laughing so much? I don't understand. Like, yeah, if their shit's rejected, they get sent back, right? Why is that funny that we send them on a plane? But anywho, we're on a new question, so let's see where this goes.
Again, that's like a legal gray zone, but that's not speaking to the larger issues. Like,
no, that is almost,
anyway.
If you don't have a legitimate claim to refugee status and you're coming from a country that you know you can be deported to and you want to stay, a lot of them, a large amount, destroy their passports like before they even get to the water.
I know. I'm just really interested in this claim about
destroyed passports all over the ground. So, like, what do you do about that?
I saw some passports, buddy. You can't make me forget those fucking life vests on the shore. What do we do? So at this point, given she keeps repeating this, Loner has to find like a good, suitable way of like putting to rest this point that she keeps bringing up, and we don't really have that. Like, I get that we keep repeating we'll have to process them, but I don't think it is satiating her with her problem here.
I don't doubt that you saw a bunch of destroyed passports, but again, like, what are the stats on that? Because most people who arrive, as far as I remember, they make claims.
Well, they attempt to, and a lot fail, unfortunately. And then you have a bunch of people stuck in limbo under bridges and in camps, which, as you said, has increased anti-migrant sentiment all across Europe.
Oh man, she like tucks in the concession in the very beginning, like a little bit, like, yeah, a lot do, but some don't, and those some end up under bridges. Like, okay, but you're saying that it's a huge problem that we have all these people that are destroying their documents and stuff. He says that doesn't represent the vast majority of people. The vast majority of people applied beforehand. You're saying sure, but then we have people under bridges. Like, we're like looping in a disastrous way here. And unfortunately, here comes a hot take. Lonerbox has to get us out of this loop. It has to be him, because she will continue to reinforce it. The longer we can stay in this loop, the better it is for Lauren, but it doesn't help Lonerbox at all. So Lonerbox's job here has to be to get us out of the loop.
It's a problem, and it's a problem that I can accept is complex, and you bring up good points, but you still, you've still massively got the problem when you don't stop where it's occurring. As you've said, one thing is to potentially stop the push factors, and I am all for investigating and what we can do there, but sometimes the push factors, and in a lot of cases, are just general poverty. And I think if we're speaking in a sane manner, we know world poverty is unfortunately just never going to go away.
You see what she does? He talked about push factors. He talked about factors in the country. She includes that in her response and then tacks that onto the economic factors are also push factors coming from those countries. And that's what I want to address. Like her or hate her, this is a good example of what I encourage you guys to do when I'm saying use the words of the other person. If the other person gave you talking points, work in those talking points into your own points, demonstrates an understanding of what the other person is saying, and puts it into language that they may be more easy to digest or address, right? And she's doing that here. So props rhetorically to Lauren. Do that in your own personal conversations. I think it's good.
So in that case, you have to go to the next push factor, which is the fact that you just have a trafficking service happening in the Mediterranean and open borders there. So
I mean, are you still describing the NGOs as a trafficking service? Because I thought we kind of just established that they were doing everything within their rights.
Oh, I think the Mare Nostrum mission that was actually arresting traffickers while picking up people that were genuinely in distress wasn't a trafficking service. But if you are just a service that is going off into foreign waters, picking people up and bringing them back in, that's a trafficking service, of course. And that was exactly what was occurring. I haven't explored Libya, but I've explored the other two largest points, Turkey and Morocco, and that is exactly what was happening there.
Well, Morocco, okay, but again, NGOs doing, I think when you were talking about NGOs, like actually doing trafficking, like you don't actually buy that those investigations are not turning out any evidence of them, including with smugglers, though,
I think they are absolutely going and picking up people that are not in distress. Of course. You don't think that's happening?
Well, no, because
you don't think if they find a boat of people that are doing just fine, they don't pick them up anyways? Like, because I know how I would think if I were doing that. I'd be like, yeah, help them out. Let's pick them up. And then we'll just say they were in distress when we get back. Of course they'd do that.
Why would they, again, because they're globalists or whatever? I don't know.
Well, because they want people to come over no matter what. They're open borders. Of course, they support that. They just say, yeah, we have to skirt the legal thing. And I know this because we've talked to them.
Okay, so yeah, that's just like, okay, maybe I'm sure that some of the ones you talked to were, but again, like, when NGOs have been accused of this, they have to publish. You can look at the Juventa case. This was one where they actually had to publish all of their logs, because NGOs film all their missions. they have evidence of them doing this.
Do they?
And
Well, sounds like he can get pushback here. Let's see what he's got cooking in the kitchen here.
yeah, you can look up the Juventa case if you want. They released all their archives.
I'll go look at it. It can
because
be
they
really.
were
Do you actually have the
investigated for
court
this.
documents? Because it can be so difficult. Like with the Panos case, like they're actually ERCI are still under investigation. You know, like they're.
I know they are. So I mean, the Aquarius are still under investigation for dropping AIDS into the sea. You know, these investigations.
Yeah, so these investigations aren't over, and as we both know, sometimes excuses will be made that are legitimate but are made to actually discover further criminal activities. So someone who's a massive gang member will be arrested for, you know, having pot on them, but the intention will be to further an investigation into their activities or give the police rights to be able to have a search warrant for their home to find something bigger. And I assume certainly Salvini, and I at least think you'd agree with this, Salvini and the prosecutors working with him are probably hoping to investigate more with this case than just AIDS blankets.
Yeah, but why would I don't know if I can trust anyone who's worried about AIDS blankets. But anyway,
what I'm
yeah,
saying is there is a bigger thing going on than just the AIDS blankets, but the AIDS
you
blankets
don't know
are
that,
what
like,
they were able to get them on.
I would really just not engage with this at all if I were Lonerbox. Like, sure, yeah, maybe through the course of the investigation, they're seeing if anything else comes up. If something else comes up, then of course they would look into that further, yada, yada. It just like move off of it. I don't think this is worth arguing about. I really don't, but maybe Lonerbox has a different idea of what his goal is here.
Of course, they've been accusing them of people trafficking for years. So of course
But
I know
again,
that. I know they think that.
yeah. So why the AIDS blankets though? That's so
Because
weird.
they could catch them on that, because they actually have the physical.
How can you
at the
catch
here's
someone?
The clothing, here's the.
How can you catch someone in AIDS blankets though?
It's HIV infected clothes, as you stated on your video from.
But you can't get HIV from clothes.
What do you?
No, somebody don't know how HIV works.
So it's clothing that has been contaminated.
Yeah, you can't get clothing. You can't get HIV from clothes. Even if there's blood on the clothes, you can't get HIV from like touching HIV like clothes. HIV dies as soon as it leaves.
Let's look it up, because there must be some
look up
sort
the
of
CDC,
law that
can't
they're
we?
going under. Like, I assume they aren't contaminated.
They were going under toxic waste, but again,
Right.
like clothes, the clothes of people who have HIV is not toxic waste. It was just labeled as special waste, and that was it. Like,
Okay, well, I'd have to look into the law, because I'm sure, like, medical clothing, you know, when you go into a hospital and there's, like, the blood bins, you throw it in there and it's considered toxic waste if it's people who have diseases. So, I mean, I assume there was some legal precedent for that. As I said, I have not done a full legal analysis of your video, and it can be, and after doing your research, I am sure you would agree with this, it is a bitch to find European actual case documents, especially using, like, English Google, having to put in all the little preferences and be like, no, put it in Greek, no, from this time, no, legal cases, Google Scholar, and it's just like you're getting to the 11th page of Google.
And now she's like establishing rapport with him through proving at the same time that she does a bunch of research. And if you trust the research of Lonerbox and the extents that he goes to, she also can commiserate with that because she does tons of research. Okay. I mean, like, I can't shit on her for rapport building, but this is certainly benefiting her and taking up talk time, and it's all good for Lauren.
this one I'm going to send you actually has like images as well of the.
Yeah, contaminated
Juventa.
medical waste or biohazard.
Yeah, but it's not a biohazard if it's clothes that someone who had AIDS wore. Like, it's just such a strange accusation.
And she's going to keep on going with the rapport building. I don't know why we're talking about this. This is very, very silly. I know that he is very opinionated about it. He has been from the very beginning. He's put out all the signals that he thinks this is one of the most ridiculous things to come out of his video. But I don't feel like it's got a lot of substance to it. It doesn't have a lot of teeth. If I were Lauren, again, and my goal is to avoid scathing critique that had come from the Lonerbox video, I am happy during the hour that I have assigned to you to have a conversation with you to spend as much time as possible talking about something as silly as AIDS blankets. Of all the things I said in there, some of which may have been incorrect, the more time that you allow me to divert to AIDS blankets, the more happy I am with your participation in the conversation. So he needs to see that, though. He does at certain points, but then he gets caught on stuff like this. And we spent a considerable amount of time so far just now on the AIDS blankets.
It's like, I think I know why they did it.
Because I assume the media, like, as we both know, the media they're like AIDS blankets. They won't actually.
No, this is what the prosecutors said. They said it was clothing contaminated.
Okay, do you have the actual, like, prosecution document not interpreted by the media?
Is that what you had? Because you're the one that made the claim. I got the claim from you.
Well, that's what I read from the media, that's why the ship was shut down.
So you took the media at their word. I'm doing the same.
So
like,
I'm saying that's why the ship was shut down. But if you're saying that it's like a bizarre legal claim that has no precedent, we'd have to actually look at the legal documents. Like,
well,
I get what you're saying. Like, oh, you can't catch HIV from just this clothes. Well, let's see what the actual.
Well, I know why they said. Because
claims.
if you accuse someone of something, that has to get investigated. And if you say they were mismanaging toxic waste, then they have to investigate that. Mm-hmm. But since the toxic waste they're referring to is clothes of people who had HIV.
Right, okay, well, like I said, I'll have to actually look into what laws are around that and why they have that law in. And that's just what I know, that the ship was initially impounded and shut down by Italy anyways. I know it had been impounded and shut down in multiple other countries before for their activities, but yeah.
What other activities were they impounded for?
I just know that other countries had taken away their license and ability before.
No, that's not impounding, though.
Black hole of nonsense, just move on to important issues. That's where I'm at with it. But I could be wrong, right? Like, maybe Lonerbox thinks this is super important. I would hate to think that that's where his mind is at, but I don't know, maybe. It doesn't matter if you can catch AIDS or not. If the law is it must be considered as toxic waste, then the law is what matters, not if you can actually get AIDS from clothes. Yeah, but we're talking about two things at the same time, and that's why it's annoying. Can you catch AIDS from clothes? Pretty sure the medical answer is no. Now, do you have to sort garbage and set it aside that was from people who were infected with it? Yeah, maybe. Maybe that's what the law says. But to conflate these two things and use them interchangeably muddies the water in a way that's not super helpful. That's why I'm saying, like, and then if we zoom out, the AIDS blankets is just not an important point at all. So the fact that we're like 8 levels deep and mixing up two things 8 levels deep on a topic that doesn't matter at all, we lost sight of the light here. We lost sight of what the point of the conversation is. And we're 8 levels deep arguing about this stupid shit on a point that doesn't matter.
If they take away their, I mean, there's a whole.
I'm pretty sure they were impounded in Spain as well. Impounded.
Were they impounded by Spain or were they just there?
Let's see.
I know, because I know their charge is for AIDS clothes. Like that's what they're under investigation for.
It's so hard to find information on the Aquarius case, though. I was like, I couldn't find anything in the last year from the short Googling I did before.
Well, I'm just wondering why you brought it up.
Wait. Because I'm saying, like, that beyond people are like, you're trying to be a a non-government enforcer of the law, Lauren, and I'm like, well, the government have actually impounded and
they
taken the ship in themselves.
Well, no, they took the ship in a year after you did your thing with the boat.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. Like the ship.
So there was nothing.
The ship had been accused of illegal activity, and they had been taken in and impounded by the government, and were not allowed to sail anymore. So people were accusing me of being this force of like, you think you're above the law, but I'm like, no, the law actually decided that the ship was problematic as well. And we'll have to go through the specific things that they have put forward. That was one of the reasons, the toxic waste, which I'm sure there is more to that than just what the media have reported, because we'll have to get the exact case documents, but that was the reason the government have impounded the ship, and the government have decided that there was at least some premise or standing for them to do that and to stop their missions.
Again, like, so yeah, again, toxic waste didn't come up until after. That's post hoc. And again, trafficking, there wasn't even an investigation or like a charge.
There was an investigation.
The investigation didn't start until 2018, didn't it? 2017, 2018?
So there was an investigation.
Oh, no. Now she's getting these little rhetorical wins because we're 20 levels deep on a topic that doesn't matter. And I heard the comment earlier that what matters to us doesn't necessarily matter to them. Yes, but what a silly statement, because we are us and we know from our perspective, we're talking from our perspective. They may not know that in this moment, but we're the hindsight people and we're watching it, so our perspective matters just as much as theirs.
Oh, but you're saying
I know there was investigation,
after.
but it didn't. Yeah, it happened after, didn't it? Because you weren't talking about them. You were talking about them bringing in illegals.
Because the point was that there are illegal migrants coming in that don't actually have refugee status, and we're finding that out more and more going forward, that these people don't actually have claim to refugee status.
I noticed Lonerbox is getting baited pretty badly. I find that hard too. How to steer the conversation away from the dumb points. I get easily trapped into discussing points and positions I do not really hold or know nothing about. I suppose it's important to agree on what to discuss before going into the convo. Sure. Or, because you have only control over what you have control over, keep in front of you and keep at the forefront of your mind what is the purpose of your discussion and where will you not allow it to go, and constantly evaluate that. This is a mindfulness exercise, right? So when I talked to Lauren Southern, I had in front of me 3 or 4 main points on a piece of paper. And from those 3 or 4 points on my piece of paper, I made sure that I was always following them. One of those was don't get into a debate with Lauren Southern. So when I catch myself breaking one of those points, I bring myself back. All right, we need to chart a course out of this debate. You could iterate those points or say them, I guess, at the very beginning so that you can reference back to what your purpose was. That's good, for sure. But yeah, you need to hold yourself accountable. So Lonerbox at any point in this could say, sure, well, I think there are probably interesting things to discuss about with the AIDS blankets. I would really like to focus on or ask you about blah, 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 right? And then if Lauren chooses to have a tug of war on that new topic and this topic, she can, but I doubt it. I think we would just move on and go to something else, right? But he never makes that effort. Instead, we're sticking to this. So I think that the number one thing is do not contribute to being stuck in the topic that you don't want to be in, right? Realize that you need to make course for getting out. That may take a couple of conversational steps, but it's going to take longer and longer the more and more time you waste in a topic you don't want to talk about. So have that at the forefront of your mind, have it written down in front of you or externalized so you're not dealing with emotions and human memory, and then constantly check in with it as if it were a mindfulness exercise. You see that you're going out of bounds, bring it back into bounds. I don't think bringing it back into bounds is that difficult, as long as like you're okay with abandoning whatever point you guys are presently on. I find that people, when we really drill down to it, it's not hard for them to escape. It's not hard for us to pave a path outside of a certain topic. What is difficult is they feel compelled to continue. And that's a personal problem. That's not a Lauren Southern problem. In this case, if we're talking from Loner's perspective, it's a Lonerbox problem. Loner needs to let go and be okay with letting go. And so do a lot of the clients that I talk to in private advice with debate stuff. They personally need to let it go, and they have to get over that. That's the hard part, is being okay with letting go of the topic that you're currently on. Like, you have to take a step back and have a sober moment of like, this isn't what I want to talk about. Even if I score points here, it doesn't make a difference in my larger purpose for this conversation. And once you come to that realization, you hold on to it for a little bit, you realize that whatever the cost, you need to get out of the current topic. Losing points on this current topic does not necessarily have a larger impact on the conversation you want to have. Whatever you're going to gain out of shifting the conversation is going to be greater than what you lose by exiting this topic that's unimportant to you. That's how it's going to be most of the time. And I think you have to do that equation in your head and realize it's worth it to pull out, often regardless of the cost.
Yeah, so this again, this has nothing to do with illegal activity or infected blankets.
Okay, the first illegal activity is migrants coming in without refugee status, so they're committing the illegal
it's
activity.
not
The boat.
what the boat, like is the boat doing that? Because the boat's supposed to take people to the next port of call, which was Italy. The boat was supposed to do that.
I'm still not sure. So let's see. Can you link me that European Union document, next port of call?
Next port of call is, let me find it.
I assume that after you get used to switching topics rapidly, you can become pretty good after a while from not getting bogged down. I don't think it's learning how to switch topics. I think this is the least important skill. I really want to focus you on mindfulness. Mindfulness is the important skill, not this ability to switch topics. Switching topics is very easy. It is the mindfulness of staying on topic and realizing you're off topic that is the skill you have to hone. So I want to be I want to make that as clear as possible. There is not an important skill of segueing topics. That's not the important skill. The important skill is realizing as early as possible that you're off topic, and keeping your mind's eye on what your purpose is and what the topic you want to discuss is. That's the skill you have to hone. That's what's going to help you. There is not some magical, like, charismatic guy that can switch topics. So I heard you mentioning blah, blah, blah. I think that blah, blah, blah is the best. As a matter of fact, that reminds me of this time that blah, 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 right? Like, that's not the skill. The skill is like the internal dialogue in your head that goes like, wait, why are we talking about the AIDS blankets? What did I want to talk about? Oh, I wanted to talk about this refugee versus migrant thing. That would be way cooler to talk about. And then the execution, that's easy. Like, okay, yeah. Setting aside the AIDS blankets thing, I was curious to get an answer to this. It's super easy at transition. Transitioning is easy. It's keeping in mind when you go off the path and doing that as quickly as possible. That's the hard part, in my opinion. So yeah.
It's UN. Here we go. Yeah, it's actually in your DMs. It's in the one that ends in 9.4 PDF. And if you just look at page 8, next port of call.
So that's UN though.
Someone in chat's calling me laundry box. That's really funny.
Laundry box.
Thanks, Book. This is really solid advice. I have been aware of this. I usually go with the flow, so I tend to sort of get wrapped up on what the other person. So yeah, like, if you're the person that usually goes with the flow, you will find that if you are not the one steering the boat, that river is going to determine where you go. Or even worse, if there's another oarsman on the boat that cares about steering it more than you do, like Lauren does in this conversation, she will steer you wherever the fuck she wants. So you don't want to cede, like, paying attention to where we're navigating. You don't want to cede the rudder to somebody else. You want to have that hand on the rudder and have your eyes on where you want to go, and constantly check your bearing and make sure you're heading in the right direction, and navigate between that hand on the rudder and your eyes looking at where you want to go. So having these two things happening at once is important. And if you go with the flow all the time, you will find that it'll always put the other person in control, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. If you can, through subtle nods and conversational practices, get that person to go where you want them to go, that's amazing, right? If they feel like they're in control and they're following exactly where you want them to go, that's awesome. But it's not normally the case, I find, in like everyday conversations, not between spousal, partnerships, not between boyfriend and girlfriend, not between mom and son, not between, not in any of these relationships is that normally the case. Between good friends, maybe, but a lot of the time when you're in conflict, that's not what's happening. Both people have a tug of war on where they want the conversation to go. And if you choose not to engage in that game at all, yeah, the conversation is going to flow off into a place that you never wanted to go, because you're refusing to take control of it at all, right? And so, yeah, if you're in the habit of that, that's definitely gonna hurt you there. I find conceding into discussion is a lot less dangerous than most people think. Yeah, especially in real life, guys. Remember, you shit on concessions because we're watching online debates. In real life, concessions are amazing. They're like free gold that you get to pull out of your ass and give to people. And it's like fool's gold. It could mean nothing to you. You can't go out there and sell it and get anything for it. But other people value it a ton, right? Like, it's free money. Like, you just get to make the money printer go brrr and make people happy. Like, concessions are free for you. As long as you don't have an ego and you keep that in check, as long as you don't get prideful about concessions, like, they cost you nothing and they're super valuable to other people. It's like giving somebody a compliment. Like, if you guys ever read How to Win Friends and Influence People, this is a huge part of that book, is like honest, good, like, feedback and compliments are free, and they're worth a lot to other people. Thank you for that. I appreciate it. So yeah, like, remember, in real life, concessions are huge. Use them to your advantage all the time. I concede all the time. As a matter of fact, one of the thought processes in my head is constantly, can I look for concession? And it's usually triggered by knowing that a conversation is turning into an argument. Like when I talk with Relly, when I talk with Supreme, when I talk with Lucifer, when I talk with anybody in private, when I talk with my mom, for fuck's sake, my dad, my brothers, my sisters, if we get into an argument, I'm always looking for where I could concede. It triggers something in my brain where I'm like, what is this person saying that I agree with? Where is this person pointing out that I'm wrong, that I may be wrong? Because even saying, I might be wrong about this, blah, 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 feels like a concession to them. And it costed you nothing. And it's a nothing statement. I could be wrong about this. Yeah. And I could equally be right about this. But rather than saying I could be right or I think I'm right, saying I could be wrong has a huge benefit to the other person and costed you nothing. It means nothing. Maybe I should repeat this because this is super important for me and maybe it'll help you in real life. When I am in a conversation and me and somebody else disagree, I don't want necessarily to convince them. That's a very high level thing. What I want is for them to respect a thought that I have. I want them to respect an outcome of thought. I want them to respect a perspective. I'm willing to respect theirs. All I want is for them to respect mine. I want them to look at my position and go, I can see how you arrived at that. Perhaps we agreed to disagree on these fundamental things, and that's why we led to these different conclusions. But if I believed what you believed, I would believe this thing. That's all I want. It's a very small one. At the end of every, like argument, that's all I want. That's all I'm looking for. Just tell me that you respect the position that I put forward. Because if you can respect my position, I can respect your position. We won't be assholes to each other. So that's all I want, I don't hear anybody ever say that. I don't hear anybody ever talk in those terms. But for me, it's all about respect. I just want you to respect what I'm putting out there, what I believe about something, and that's it. I'm okay with us having different opinions. I don't necessarily want to convince you to my opinion because all of that has to come after respect. If you don't respect my position, I'm never going to convince you to believe in it. Respect comes before you change your belief. You have to respect and understand my position before you can even hope to adopt it for your own. So I go for that ground floor. As long as you can respect and understand this position, we can build off of that, But if we can't get there, there's no way in hell that I'm convincing you to take it on as your own.
Sorry, I don't want to be rude. I don't want to be rude, but I feel like this is the kind of research you'd want to do before making claims against a refugee boat that's safe.
Well, no, at the time I had, of course, done a lot of the research. It's been, 2017, 18, 19, 20, 21. It's been like 5 years, right? 4 or 5 years. It's been a minute since I've been looking into this ship and its actions, and the first time I've done a whole lot of looking into it was probably that last video I did, the Vindicated one you reviewed, and then like yesterday doing a bit of Googling about and looking through some of the data you posted below your video. So it's been a minute since I've actually done a look into the update. And in Borderless, obviously I was reporting on the specific organizations between Turkey and Greece and Morocco and Spain, which is why I have a lot more to say on them right now than I do about the Aquarius, because that's been the most recent research I've done into it.
Okay.
I'm not seeing anything about next port of call in this document you sent me.
If you control find, are you on page 8?
Remember, we have a limited time to have this conversation. All of this time we're spending on this shit is really, really good for Lauren because it means less time we're spending criticizing her. We're just chilling.
Which page was it? 8? Clearly.
8. It's section 30.
Okay, there we go. Next port of call. In summary, the executive committee, blah, 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 blah.
You have to understand, the longer that we spend on this where he is not talking, the more I'm just like, all right, Lauren is winning. This is all time that helps Lauren because we're not discussing criticisms of her content and she just gets to spend time Googling and it's dead air. This is all time that Lonerbox could be using. Advice to Lonerbox, use this dead time to talk because she certainly uses that when you start Googling shit, right? Anywho, let's just keep helping Lauren here.
I'm going to have to actually look into this a bit more because I'm not sure if from the time that I was looking into this, it was definitely the closest port you have to drop them off at if it is someone at sea. So.
And again, well, first of all, I think the qualifier, even if that's true in the case of the Aquarius, it would be the closest port of safety. Libya is not a port of safety. Morocco is further away. The Moroccan waters are further away from Spain, let alone Italy.
What would be a good thing to talk about while Lauren searches? Exactly what Lonerbox just did, like the whole time. Bringing up other points to overwhelm her with stuff that she can't respond to. Like,
there may be instances where the next port of call may not be the closest one, but rather the one best equipped for the purposes of receiving traumatized and injured victims and subsequently processing any asylum applications. In other situations involving state vessels intercepting illegal migrants, the nearest port of that state could be regarded as the most appropriate port for disembarkation purposes. So I do think that this does say intercepting illegal migrants, you put them in the most appropriate state, which means the state they came from. Would you not agree?
That's how we're choosing to interpret this? Interesting. Very interesting. Okay. So she dug through this for any point that she could make, and this is the one she's making. Will he get stunlocked? Will he know how to handle this interpretation? Let's see.
How do you know they're illegal when you found them at sea?
Mate, like, I don't know what to tell you. There's a reason why Australia has the policies they do and why
my God. I don't know, dude. I don't know what's going on. I can't, dude. I'm cringing, dude.
Australia has the policies they do and why they have worked so well, and why Europe is currently dealing with a bunch of people living under bridges and burning down migrant camps in Greece.
Oh, man. She just, like, goes back to the beginning. We broke her, dude. She did a fucking soft reboot, dude. She's restoring to a previous point of her operating system. That's too much, dude. That's too much. Oh, fuck. Lonerbox. Here it is. Here's the TLDR. So, number one, fill empty space with your points. Number two, when she gets onto something like AIDS blankets, some process in your brain has to notice that, like, you guys are on a point that I'm sure you in hindsight would realize is not the most important one that you would want to discuss, and to pull back out of it and reframe to another point. Another one, but this is like way more minor. She sets up traps and she will continue talking and talking and talking. So managing the talking, looking out for traps. These are two important things. More of a problem at the beginning of the talk than it was at the end. But yeah, I think the filling the silence is like a big thing. The other big thing is just making sure that the points that you're focusing on and spending time on and using your limited time on the mic for are things that you want to talk about, and back out at things that you don't want to talk about. Maybe a third or a fourth thing is you have a really good point about we need to process the people that are coming over. I think she just does not understand it. We get so close every time we get there. It's like edging. I feel like we're so fucking close, and then it all falls apart, and we're not able to make a point that I feel like we would want to make. I don't know what the solution to that is, though, because you got her so close that one time and she turned into the serfs. She just like froze up and fucking powered down, and she rebooted and she just repeated her points over again. Like, so I don't know how to get through to her, but that's definitely like the leap, right? That's definitely the leap that we have to get past. I just don't know how to get her past that. It's so rough. I don't know how we do it. I have no prescription for you there. She understands it just ruins her whole argumentation, so she goes back. That's a big assumption. We don't know if that's the case. I get that you can make leaps that I can't make because you're willing to be bad faith. She may be deserving of bad faith. I'm not even saying that she's not, but it's like, if it was more crystal clear, I would agree with you, but I don't know because we don't have follow-up on that push from Lonerbox. If we had follow-up like Lycan had with the serfs, I could buy into this. Lycan did that with the serfs. When he saw that there was a point that serfs just wasn't looking to explain, or there were questions he just straight up wasn't answering, and he asked them 3 times. He pointed out at a meta level, you're avoiding this thing, and serfs responds the way that he responds, then I can make the call. Okay, he's honestly doing this on purpose. So then I can make the leap. But every time we get her close there, she says some other shit, and then you talk about the other shit. We don't go, okay, I know the points that you're making. I hope that's clear. Like, I understand all the stuff you're saying. I feel like the conversation is shutting down every time we get to this one concept. So I just want to make sure you understand what the process is right? For like determining this. We have to determine it in the country. So we have to bring them to the country. They're there for a temporary amount of time while we process them. Now, you may want to put them on some fucking island while we process them, and that has its own problems, its own pros and cons, but you understand that there is a process here where we have to process them, and then we make the determination as to whether or not they could be here. But I need you to realize that in-between point is very important, right? Like, you guys got so close to it at the beginning. We keep getting these close moments where we're able to like make that clear, and it's where I feel like she shuts down, and so that to me tells me that that's an important spot. It's like if you looked up in the night sky and there was one like odd shape, one triangle where we don't see any stars, like maybe there's something there. There's something blocking the light from getting there. There should be stars there and it's missing. It's like in Star Wars when they looked at that one region of space and the whole system was missing. And Obi-Wan Kenobi's like, oh, there should be a system here. Like, yeah, there should be. That's where we got to go. Because some motherfucker deleted it off the map. For some reason, there is not a system where a system should be. So we have to focus there, right? Yeah, I get you. I think dragging myself out of bed at 3 a.m. after a DM from Samantha was my first mistake. Perhaps. I don't know. I don't think this is down to tiredness, though. We could put it on tiredness, but I think we've seen a lot of YouTubers and Twitch streamers in the past go to this tiredness defense, and it just never looks super optically good. So I would advise against that. Like, I don't know if this is tiredness, but like it's just an observation of like where I think the conversation breaks down. I just don't know how we would get past it. I don't think you being fully awake would get you past it necessarily, but maybe there would be creative juices flowing that otherwise aren't flowing. But yeah, I wouldn't attribute any of this to being tired, because you do fine on other stuff and you pick up on when she's going down paths that are dumb, other than the AIDS blanket thing. So, you know, like I don't have like scathing criticism for you. The main point I want to focus on is getting that across to her. But man, she could just be so dense and she shuts down that like I don't know what the solution there is. It's unfortunate, dude. I think we're all done with this. We've given Loner all the advice we could give him. We've given Lauren all the advice we could give her. I've talked to you guys about advice related to this conversation. Like I think we squeezed every like important thing we did out of this. Lo-fi beats the study and watch immigrants drown to.